Hello and welcome back. Today we're doing a portrait painting in watercolors. And what I did first, I kind of just laid my colors. I already have my palette pretty messy washes in there that I kind of have already recorded in there. So that's why I don't like to mess much with the washes that I already have because they might be difficult. So that's what I'm using. I'm actually using a photo reference again. I paint from both memory and photo reference sometimes. And today's theme is basically just making portraits of different things. I was making fairies and then I end up doing a portrait just for the fun of it. It's a 4x6 and I started it a little bit more different than my previous paintings. It's more of just wetting to wet and then you add the adjacent color and then from there you kind of take it. I'm also lifting up as you can see, and what I do is that I just throw in a little bit of that paint, lift up with my brush, and then add more shadow, of course. So that's what you see me doing in this uh, video right now. So as I'm looking at the reference photo, I started doing the hair, in this case the red hair. I added a little bit of crimson color, a hint of a little bit more red, and I am adding some bluish tone for the eye sockets. Just going with what I think is the best shadow in that case. And I'm doing this with a square brush, and this brush is basically just for the beginning of the portrait. And I continue lifting and spreading out that bluish around the face. Of course, the picture is not the greatest, and I'm having a bit difficulty finding where the shadow is, but I managed to kind of just do at least the face and the shape of the face. And then I have to make my own shadow in this case. I'm also taking away part of the light or the shadow from the hair. And I'm also kind of just shrinking the face a little bit as to where I can add more shadow and more light. Of course, in watercolors. And I was explaining in the live video on Periscope that when it comes to watercolors, and you can also apply this, I think hair is a very iffy and difficult subject for some. So you can apply the same thing onto hair. What I said was that, and I think is a much easier way of understanding on how to do hair if you see it that way. Just like any subject, if you were to look at an apple, you'll go with form, light, and shape, right? So the same thing goes for hair. You'll go with the lightest light, the shadow, and then you add the form, and it will be much, much easier. I was also mentioning that we have to squint. Like, how can you get the lightest light? When you squint, you can see even the undertones of different shadows. When it comes to white objects, because most of the white objects, when they're reflecting the light, per se, light bulb, or perhaps the light from outside, they will reflect the next available color that they have right next to them. So even with a white object, if you squint your eyes, you'll be able to see the adjacent color of the shadow of that subject. So that's what I was explaining. I know it's a bit difficult, but if you just go with, I guess, with what you think is right, when it comes to squinting as well as looking at your lightest light and darkest dark, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about, specifically when it comes to hair. The same thing goes for a portrait. If you squint, you'll be able to see where the light is actually hitting, and you will be able to see where the dark is hitting. Of course, using a picture from the internet or using a regular picture is much more difficult than actually having a actual human being sitting in front of you. So it's always good to practice with both, with pictures and an actual person. When you have a person in front of you, you'll be able to capture lights and shadows that you might not be able to capture with a picture. For example, right here, I don't have much of the shadow, so I have to make up my own shadow, which is not the greatest thing, and it's kind of difficult to do it, believe me. But what I have is a picture, so I try my best to just do it. I'm also, of course, doing all this for practice because it's good to just keep on going. It keeps you going, and it's good to practice with anything that you have. And the most important thing is good that you're doing something, artistically speaking or creatively speaking. So when you're creating a painting, it's always good to splatter. I like that effect, so I'm doing it with, and of course I'm covering the main object. I didn't want it to splatter on the portrait or the picture, and but surrounding and the background. Since I'm not adding any background color, I thought it was a good idea. So that's what you see me doing here, and it's not a specific color, but I had a little bit of a mud watery wash in there of bluish and purple, and that's what I added into the picture or the surrounding background. So I'm gonna go now and possibly just mix the bluish tone that I have on the left. I know you can see I'm actually recording from my phone, and for that I truly apologize, but you can see that I'm focusing a lot on the eyes. And I go around and also do the nostrils, and I also mark where the eyebrows are because that's part of the portrait, and it also helps you develop. However, eyebrows as well as hair, we go with the same thing, just where the light is and the shape of them more than just the actual eyebrow hair. If you focus on the details, you might get lost and you might focus too much on the details. So don't focus on the hair of the eyebrow, but more on the form and the shape and the shadow of it. And when you do that, specifically with eyebrows, it will come much easier for you. We are also putting down part of the shadow of the nose and the outside. And also I was explaining that if you do too much on the outer corner of the nose, then you'll get too much of an accent on the nose. So sometimes it's better to just do the shadow underneath the nose. It's just for it looks more aesthetically pleasing depending on what you want to portray. But if you do the corner side of the nose too much, or you do too much dark, you add too much darkness on that corner, then you'll have a very strong nose. And the same thing goes for the tip of it. You should always leave at least a highlight, because it just helps you and it doesn't accentuate the nose as much. Of course, this is just a practice portrait. If you were to do, I believe that if you were to do a portrait yourself of someone, you want to add those characteristics to the person of what you see in your picture. But for this picture, it's more about just practicing, and I'm having fun as I go. Now we add the shadow underneath the chin, and we also add the shadow of the neck. I was a bit upset that the left side doesn't have as much shadow, and I couldn't capture. I always like that high bone after the shoulder. I really like that in my portraits, and I like to portray it, but it doesn't really show, and it's fine. As long as it gives me a good shadow, I'm good for it. Again, painting for from a picture is not the greatest thing, but it actually I'm enjoying doing this portrait. I know I wish I could at least show you some part and details of this painting, because I think it is important, specifically the washes that I'm using. Even though I have a mutant load of washes in there, because I'm mixing a lot of bluish and green tones and yellow tones and all kinds of colors. It also allows you to have an idea of what you can use in watercolors when it comes to paintings, and specifically for a light skin tone. I not necessarily do my light skin tones with the same tones, because each person have a variety of different tones in their skin. But for us to go on to skin per se, we probably need a whole book, because skin color has so definitely different types of tones in them. Perhaps someone with light skin will have a little bit more rosy into them. Perhaps someone with also light skin will have a little bit more of yellow into them. So all those deep tones or undertones are considered in painting as well. And so it could be a little bit more difficult to explain. A lot of people ask me sometimes as to what specific colors I use when I'm doing portraits, and that's what I try to explain. And the easiest way to learn is if you were to grab sand from the beach. If you see the sand has different colors. So skin tone is basically sand. Is different types of undertones and different types of skin tones, and different types of undertones on that skin. So that's the same thing that you have to capture in watercolor. I know it seems a little difficult when you explain it. Perhaps it seems a little bit more difficult, but once you get the hang of it, if you have that idea in your mind of looking at sand when it's wet, a sand when it's dry, perhaps white sand, you'll have a better understanding on how to view light on skin, as well as undertones on skin. I don't know if in the future you would like for me to explain a little bit more about skin tones and how you can achieve this in watercolors. But for now, I would like for you guys to understand that this is just a simple example as to what you can do. And you can do this with any skin tone as well. Just try to look for the undertone. If you see green on that person's skin tone, and you want to add it to their portrait. The same thing if you see blue or if you see pink. I've seen artists doing beautiful portraits all full of color. You can do whatever your heart desire because it's your art, it's your artwork, and that what makes you unique. You don't have to also. I feel like sometimes we go too much into detail and we get lost into detail. Instead of doing things one hair at a time, we can just do it the simplest way by just getting besides of the light, just getting the shape of it and the form. Don't complicate with. I feel like sometimes we want to complicate our lives when it comes to art, and our art also should come with joy, and you should feel happy. The frustrations, of course, is part of the learning process, but most of the time, when you're sitting down painting, you should feel happy and content that you're doing something good. Remember that this is not only for you, but also for those who are watching. And all I wish is that I can continue doing these exercises and that I can continue sharing with you guys. And if you like this type of paintings, please let me know. Hopefully in the near future, I could have a better phone camera or a camera that could be a little bit more high quality, so I can actually give you a little bit more depth into the washes and the things that I do when it comes to portraits and stuff like that are a little bit more complicated in watercolors. Now onto the hair, the same thing. I decided to add a little bit more red into the hair because I want to emphasize that red color, beautiful orange color that she has on her hair. I just added more in-depth red into the same shadow that I just saw. And I'm also applying a bit of the same red on her ears, and I go around on the portrait. One thing that I forgot to mention is that even though it's a small painting, you might be able to do the same exercise with a bigger painting. Is that you go around the painting, and wherever is a little bit dry or drying or drier, you go in and you add paint. So you're constantly painting. I think that something that can make people unworry because you have to wait until the paint dries and people get desperate. They want to finish your painting. So, in order for you not to go and get desperate, there's always spots you can feel with your finger as to where it's a little dry, and you can start painting from there. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you next time. Again, if you would like to follow me, my name in Twitter will be Vargas Art Studio. I also have a Periscope account where this painting was done from live. You have all my interruptions and you have the full demo as to I'm explaining to you guys how it's done. And I hope to catch you in my other social medias as well. Thank you again for watching. If you like this type of paintings or this type of demos, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment sometime. If you paint, I would like to see your work as well and to share it on my social media too. Thank you again. Have a good night. Bye bye.